Today, we are talking to Nick Wayth, Chief Executive at Energy Institute, about the organization's latest Energy Barometer report, which aims to identify and explore energy sector's biggest issues and challenges. So, Nick, thank you very, very much for joining Future Net Zero and Energy Live News.
My pleasure, Dimitris. Good to be here.
Nice to see you. So, I'm going to start with one of the findings of the survey. So, the annual Energy Barometer is out and ranks energy efficiency as the most important response to the current crisis. Do you feel that the government should treat home energy efficiency as a national security issue?
Well, Dimitris, thank you so much for having me. And I mean, first, let me just say a little bit about the barometer. We go out each year, we survey our professional members here in the UK on both the long-term trends in energy, but also the issues of the day. And clearly, we are right now in the midst of what we've called the triple energy crisis. This is the biggest crisis to impact energy since the 1970s. And clearly our members have responded to that. But you're right. I mean, the one big finding that's come out today, loud and clear from our members, is that some 70% of our members don't think that government policy has achieved enough in the area of energy efficiency.
Why do you think that the public cannot feel the impact of government's policy in this sector? And why do you think the government has not done enough yet?
Well, look, I mean, that's really for government to respond to. But what I would say is energy efficiency needs to be, probably the #1 priority. There's clearly been a lot of focus about supply. That's clearly critical to ensure that the lights remain on. But actually, energy efficiency is something that can have an impact in the short, medium, and long term. And certainly our members are calling on government to do more. #1, to support those most financially impacted by today's ongoing energy crisis and the prices that people are seeing. #2, that we have a national endeavour to improve the housing stock from what is currently an average of EPC level D to EPC level C. Thirdly, that we really make sure that government leads a behavioural campaign so that consumers understand how to better manage their energy. And lastly, we need to create the jobs and skills we're going to need to retrofit homes, to improve insulation, to install heat pumps, and create a far more efficient energy system here in the UK.
Which do you think is the biggest challenge? I know that you have already mentioned some issues regarding the energy efficiency challenges, but which do you think is the biggest challenge right now for the government in building an energy efficient housing stock? And how possible and feasible is a nationwide retrofit program, given that the UK has some of the leakiest homes in Europe right now?
Well, you're absolutely spot on, Dimitris, that the UK does have very poor housing stock on average. Clearly, some homes are better than others. I mean, in my view, we need the mechanisms, clear mechanisms. We need funding. I think the government's allocated about £6 billion to support investment in energy efficiency. I was at an event here at the Energy Institute last week where somebody from government said that London alone needs north of £90 billion to retrofit homes. So there's clearly a funding issue, but there's also the mechanisms that will allow householders to take on relatively large capital costs, and these costs might run into thousands of pounds. And if government can help with the mechanisms that allow mortgage companies potentially or other forms of finance to effectively allow homeowners to amortize those costs over multiple years, I mean, most energy efficiency projects are net positive in terms of their economic outcome. It's really just who fronts up the capital and how that's financed. So there's a huge element around finance. I also think sort of looking at the EPC system and really striving for more. And then clearly we have the opportunity with new builds. And whilst the quality of new builds is much higher than it was historically, there is still much more that can be done to improve the insulation of those new builds.
I'm going back to another finding of the Energy Barometer. 9 in 10 people see fuel poverty policy as failing. with estimates being published recently suggesting that energy bills could reach 3,200 a year in the coming months. What do you think is needed to address the big issue of fuel poverty? Do you feel that government support is enough to address the rising numbers of fuel poor homes?
Well, look, we are in a fuel pricing crisis right now, and some estimates expect over 40% of households in the UK to be in fuel poverty this winter. We're already seeing those prices come through, and the estimates that I've seen, and I've seen even higher numbers than the number you just quoted, are going to have a devastating impact on many homes, and homeowners are going to have to make difficult decisions around whether they heat their own homes, whether they buy food, whether they buy clothes. And let's be very clear: this is a tragic set of circumstances that is going to affect many individuals around the world, and particularly here in the UK. I mean, I think how government redistributes finances, taxation, clearly is a matter for government, but what our members have told us is that they would like to see more targeted effort of deploying help to those who need it most. We've seen the one-off payments coming through, and they'll be coming through this winter for all householders. Our members have said, well, actually, those should be perhaps more targeted to those who need them most.
According to the report, soaring energy prices is a top concern for energy professionals. This is followed by climate change and security of supply. What's your take on this finding, on this result? Do you feel that people worry fairly enough about bills and prices? And do you feel also that this could overshadow climate actions in the long term?
Look, I mean, yeah, all three of these aspects are, are crises in of themselves, and coupled together, that has taken us into this sort of new world of a triple crisis. And the reality is if you can't afford to heat your home and put food on the table for your children, that has got to be your number one concern. That's completely natural. However, I think, historically, the trilemma, as it was called, was sort of seen as a rotating sort of, you could do one but not the other, and that they were in tension. My personal conviction is that these three crises can be solved by the same actions. They're not in tension. In the medium to long term, if we tackle one, we can tackle all three. And we achieve that by, number one, continuing out the build of low carbon energy forms. And we've seen, even just last week, new record low prices in offshore wind here in the UK. And that build out just needs to continue at pace. Number two, we've talked a lot about energy efficiency, but that clearly, plays a significant role, and we need to keep on doing that. That's good for all seasons. Number three, decarbonisation of fossil fuels needs to continue at pace. And finally, number four, I think we just need to help educate, give advice to those all consumers on how they best manage and use energy more efficiently. But I think if we can, do all four things, we can actually deliver a resilient, low-carbon, secure energy system. It's not going to be easy. There'll be bumps in the road. But in the long term, I am confident that we will get there.
I personally believe that another interesting finding of the survey is that one that says only a third support the windfall tax on excess oil and gas profits. Just yesterday, the House of Commons approved the 25% windfall tax on oil and gas producers, overcoming criticism from oil and gas companies that said the tax would hurt investments. Others say that this tax should be extended to power generators. What's your view on this?
Well, as a professional chartered body, we're not here to lobby government and to advise on what government should and shouldn't do in terms of taxation. However, clearly the government has to balance the books. We've talked about how government supports those most vulnerable and most in need, and government clearly needs to figure out how it balances the books whilst providing the right long-term incentives to ensure that we do invest in all forms of energy here in the UK. And that's a difficult task, and that's really one for government. But I think the findings, did highlight some challenge from our members to that windfall tax, and clearly, our membership spans the breadth of the energy sector, and so clearly, some of those are impacted by some of the implications of that windfall tax on future oil and gas investment here in the UK.
Do you feel that the current volatile energy market could threaten UK's efforts towards net zero? Because we see, for example, in the survey that confidence in meeting the 2050 net zero target has dropped significantly, with 70% saying that they don't expect the UK to meet or get close to the target in time. Do you agree with that?
Well, that's what our members have told us. So 70% of them, you're right, don't believe that the UK will get close or meet a net zero by 2050. And that has increased from 54% who felt the same thing last year. And I guess there is a reality that people are concerned that security of supply, as we're seeing as a consequence of the tragic war in Ukraine, is having here in Europe. And clearly for many European countries, the ability to keep supplies of energy flowing, particularly this winter, is going to be a huge challenge and focus for those governments. And I think that's what our members are reflecting. My personal view is I'm an optimist. I think we may get there. It's going to be a bumpy road, as I already said. But I would personally have a slightly more positive view. But this is challenging stuff. I mean, I think the interesting thing about net zero is we all know what it looks like, what the end game needs to be. What I don't think anyone has actually figured out is how do we get there. There are different pathways, different forecasts, but nobody has a definitive view as to how we get there. So it's really going to require the ingenuity of many people in this energy sector, engineers, commercial folk, behavioral scientists, all sorts of talented people to deliver this net zero challenge we're all facing.
My final question for you, Nick, today is obviously that the energy market needs some reforms, some changes. Which reforms are needed, are necessary for the UK to reach net zero targets, in your opinion?
Well, look, our members have signaled that they do support international reform of energy markets. We don't necessarily dig into all the sort of specific details of what our members would include within that. But here in the UK, we've got some really great examples of things that have worked very well. I think about contracts for difference in that sense. These have been put in place to give developers long-term secure offtake agreements. But the risk and reward is symmetrical between the government and those developers. And right now we're seeing that the government is the beneficiary of CFD prices that are significantly below current market prices. That's a very positive mechanism. There are others that would call for changes in terms of how marginal power prices are set, which effectively is by gas generation when gas is decreasingly part of the mix here in the UK. There are others who would challenge how we levy environmental tariffs on consumers, which are currently focused on power rather than natural gas. So I think government needs to think about all these factors and create the right incentives. But we do have some really good examples in this country, and we probably have some areas where there's more work to be done.